So let me tell you, with all the things that were happening around Half-Life 2 last year, it was 20th anniversary of the game, which, good God, did that make me feel old. Because
Hell yeah.
I
Yeah.
think we at that point in our lives where, I mean, I remember my parents and my aunts and uncles going, the old faithful, oh, you're growing up so quick. When last time I saw you were this high, and oh, in my day we used to do this. I'm that person now where if something is mentioned, I'm like, hold up. Are you telling me Half-Life 2 came out 20 years ago? Like, shut the fuck up. That's impossible.
It just
Twen-
feels impossible
20
because
years could
like
have
games don't
gone.
feel like they've progressed enough since then.
Yeah, I'm like, well, what happened in the last 20 years? Like, shit, how much has happened? So, yeah, anyways, and there's also all these rumors like, ooh, like maybe now Half-Life 3 is actually kicking around at Valve HQ because, there are just all these rumors and blah, blah, blah. So, long story
I really
short,
thought it was going to happen at the Game Awards. I was convinced.
yes, yeah. You had me convinced, like, damn, Jeff,
I was
show
convinced.
us
I was so
Half-Life
bleak.
3. So I thought, damn, I played Half-Life 2, I think literally once on around launch when Steam was conceived. I had to update my game via a 56k modem, and boy was it a shit time on Christmas Day, dying to play the sequel to one of the best games you'd ever played, and then having to wait hours and hours for this stupid online platform that you needed to play an offline single player game, which was just beyond comprehension back then. It still is today, to some degree. But yeah, I played Half-Life 2 20 years ago, and I thought, well, let me see how this thing holds up all these years later. Like, I know the main beats pretty much, but I've forgotten a lot of the details. And if Half-Life 3 were to just land tomorrow, like, shit, I'd want a crash course. And let me tell you, this game, despite being 20 years old and despite having some aged things about it, holds up really, really well. Like insanely so, to the point where I'm thinking, shit, I didn't realize how revolutionary this game was back then. I mean, it's 20 years ago. I was much younger. I appreciated gaming better as a much older, more experienced gamer. Looking back now, I can go like, damn, Valve really did some good shit with this game. Like, there's a reason it picked up so many Game of the Year awards and why it's so beloved. And it really pushed, like Half-Life 1 did, it pushed the first-person medium or genre forward in ways you wouldn't have expected. Just everything from, even visually, like, granted, it's not the best-looking game by today's standards, but looking at the game, I was like, shit, this still looks really good for 20 years ago. And it's exactly what you said. You think, how far have games come in 20 years? Like, it feels... it's not like we're jumping from the Nintendo Entertainment System, the NES, to, PlayStation 2. But you think games have come a long way, but Half-Life 2 still looks good. That water, like, holy shit.
Yeah.
How do they do this? Even the lighting, because then you start thinking like, well, okay, like, ray tracing was a thing that came about like 4 or 5 years ago. And then before that was, you kind of sit and you have a little bit of a retrospective moment going, well, what was lighting back then? And I think Half-Life 2 was a pioneer in a lot of ways with that. And
absolutely,
then particularly with physics. I mean, that gravity gun.
Yeah.
Even I sat and I thought, I'm like, even today, I can't name a single game where there's a similar, I think it would be just straight up theft of the gravity gun in Half-Life. Like, how do you mimic that without being called out? But I can't think of another game that has like that weapon, that thing that is so integral to the experience, where it's a weapon and a means to solve like the countless puzzles that are presented to you. And I think what I really like about the game is how it does balance. It's this all-out classic first-person shooter. There's health packs and there's like energy/armor that you pick up off the floor, and there's different weapons you got to cycle through. But then you like run into a room, it's like, oh, I've got to get up there. How do I do that? Oh, I've got to solve this quick environmental puzzle. And it just feels natural. That's, it's not like you walk into a room and it's just labeled puzzle room, whatever. It just, you walk in like, oh, like I've got to use my brain. And that back then was just like not a thing, just phenomenal game. I was only going to play Half-Life 2, ended up playing episode 1 and 2 as well, because like, damn, that's
so good.
I got to remember how the story pans out. And that ending of episode 2, I forgot what an emotional gut punch that is, and how much of just the cliffhanger it was. Like I just straight up forgot. I'm like, how have they not done Half-Life 3? Like just straight up, how have they left us hanging? And I've not played Half-Life, Alex, and I have not read.
I was about to say you need to find a way to play Alex.
I've not read. I'm like obviously on purpose not reading the wiki because I've had people like you say, and I've seen online people say it recontextualizes or reframes the ending of Half-Life Episode 2.
Yep.
And all I think is...
Which is a lot of the reason why people think a 3 is coming, because why do that?
Yeah.
Why make such a big change to arguably the biggest cliffhanger in games if you're not going to explore
do something?
You need to find a way. I mean, even if there's someone you know here in South Africa that has a VR headset that you can borrow for the month that you're here, because it's not a long game. Like it's like a Half-Life game. It's like 12 hours or so.
That's still pretty long for a VR game, though.
It is, yeah, but it's like, you can play an hour or two at a time and get a lot out of it. And with so many headsets now, the ability to play like wirelessly from a PC and stuff, it's so easy to get into Alex nowadays. It's the top tier game, like still to this day the best VR experience and one of the earliest ones. Just nothing's come near it in terms of scope and creativity, I think. And I think you could say the same for Half-Life 2. It pioneered, firstly, just story-driven first-person shooters. That happened with the first game, and then they really nailed it with the sequel. And I think we got a lot of story-based first-person shooters in the years following that. But like you said, going back to Half-Life 2 is such a unique experience because I don't think a lot of games do or ever did what it does. The thing I get from it is a confidence in the people that play it to understand the rules that it presents. Like the documentary that Valve put out last year about the 20th anniversary of Half-Life 2 is very, very insightful in this sort of thing, because you hear the designers talk about how they explain the physics system to players through contextual hints. Like there's a really early scenario where you've got like a plank that's on like almost like a seesaw. And the only way out is to figure out like to take a cinder block and put it on one end and realize that, these things around me, they all contain weight and they can all affect the world in a specific way. And not long after that, you're presented with a similar scenario where you have to drop a cinder block from a high level to basically propel you up in the same manner. And I think a lot of games they're not confident enough to let players figure that stuff out. So a lot of it is scripted. A lot of it is very out of your control or very in your face, like this is how this thing is achieved.
Yeah.
Whereas Half-Life is, here are the tools, here's this very physically based world. There are definitely ways we want you to interact with things, but you have to figure those things out, like rolling explosive barrels into those little things that hang from the ceiling with their tongues out and then shooting that to kill a lot of them. Like, you don't have to do that. You can get around them in other ways, but it's super fun to do that,
Yeah.
I think Half-Life 2 especially just nails that sort of thing. And I think that's what makes it feel so timeless, is because it still feels fresh and interesting and unique.
Yeah.
And like you said, it looks good because I think it's got such a strong sense of art direction as well.
Yeah.
That's great art very rarely ages. I think that's why you can play a game like BioShock now as well, and it just looks and feels good, really good. It's got a sense of place. It doesn't rely on just ultra realism to get that across. It's a great game. I played them for the very first time, believe it or not, after playing Alex. I'd never played them, so that was like I inversed the story there. But I mean, I played Black Mesa, which is a remake of the original Half-Life, and then the rest of them like a couple of years ago. It's still so good.
Yeah.
To
go back,
I'm excited for that ray tracing patch that's coming out for Half-Life 2.
That example you said about the plank and like having to way down the onset. I remember that so well, playing that, going like, how the hell do I get out of here? And then going like, hold on, like no ways. There's no ways I've got to wait, and doing it and going like, oh my god, like of course, like the whole thing is physics in this game, and just like I remember being blown away, going like, holy shit, because that was not a thing in games. Today it's it's like a given. I mean, even in most games today, it's like there aren't necessarily like weight-based things, but that is just unseen back in the day of things having like a physical weight to it.
Yeah.
And even
And
just the last thing I'll say, problem solving that gravity gun must have drove those devs mad, because I
can't
think
imagine. Yeah.
I like the players picking up and just yeeting things all the time. Well, at least I am. I don't know about everyone else, but I mean, how do you, especially like 20 years ago, how do you stop machines from like not imploding or things falling out the map? And even one thing I don't think people think about enough is like players can very easily like kill themselves. You know, if you're in an enclosed space, I don't think I had a death once where like, oh, this thing rebounded into me, because I think they've figured out how to hard code away. I mean, it can happen, don't get me wrong, but the players should die a lot more than they do. And I firmly believe there are systems in place to stop that from happening, and they had to do that because, yeah, it's a bloody gravity gun. You can do whatever the hell you want with it.
It's like a delicate balance of making it feel very physically real and realistic, but also tweaked in the way that makes it still fun, without breaking that illusion of realism. And I think that is such a difficult thing to get right, because, you know, too much on one side makes it frustrating because it's too realistic, and then by virtue it's not as fun. And too much the other way, it becomes, you lose that illusion because you feel like you're being guided too much, like you don't actually have as much control as it's being promised. And yeah, I mean, if you look at some of the best games in recent memory that are systems driven in the same way, it's that balance that really makes them. Like a Breath of the Wild, you know, has this physics system that allows you to do the most absurd shit in it. And part of the fun is figuring out, it's finding the limits of that.
Yeah.
And it's not like it's just a base physics system that lets you do anything. Like Nintendo definitely had to shave around the edges to make sure that it was still fun, but the freeform creativity is still there. And I think Half-Life nailed that 20 years ago, in a much smaller scope, but it's still there. You can still go into Ravenholm and have a lot of fun throwing around buzzsaws and finding creative ways to kill things there. It's just really, really good.